What's shaking authortube? My name's Cam and welcome back to another video. I'm pretty damn excited for today's video because it's a follow-up to one I did nearly a year and a half ago. It was the very first video I did in the Writing Cliches to Avoid series, and here we are doing another one as a part 2 because I have a bit of a list of more fantasy cliches to avoid. Cliches to avoid is mostly just the title of the video to grab your attention, but really the purpose of these videos is just to draw your attention to a list of certain topics that the audience, that your readers have pointed out have been overused. That means you can either go a different direction and avoid them, or you can just approach them more creatively. That's the whole point. It's just you need to pay more attention if you are using these things and try to do it in a different way to how it's been done before. It's not my opinions necessarily, it's just what the audience is saying. Oh, by the way, this is the writer's block t-shirt design that I mentioned a couple of videos ago. If you like it, you can check it out. Links in the description. And the very first one is the lovable giant / deformed character with a heart of gold. It's a cliche that makes sense. It presents you with a character that looks as if they should act a certain way. It relies on how we judge people to then kind of spin it a little bit and be like, well, actually, this character is actually really nice. It's almost like taking a cliche, or it would be more appropriate to say a judgment or a stereotype, and spinning it on its heel. But the thing is, this has been done so often now that when we're introduced to a giant character, or maybe a character with like facial or posture deformities, that we're inclined to believe that they're probably going to be a good character anyway. To name a few, some of the obvious ones, you've got Hagrid, you've got Hodor, Sudogo, I just read about recently, and Black Leopard, Red Wolf, probably my favorite character from that story, by the way. The physically intimidating giant who could pretty much crush any of the other characters' skull with their bare hands, but doesn't, and generally they're haunted by things they have had to do in their past, either for their own safety or the safety of others. Couple that with, them being treated poorly by other people because they're usually pretty simple in terms of intelligence. And like I said, those exact traits can pretty much be passed on to the character with the deformities as well. What I believe is referred to as the Quasimodo cliche. That whole cliche in itself is something I do actually enjoy coming across in a story. I love redemption arcs. I love characters that could be bad so easily, and yet they make the decision to be good, and add to that are haunted by bad things they've done. I really like characters like that, but the fact is, the audience has spoken, and this is a certain cliche that they want either not done anymore or done in a different way. And I mean, how you approach that differently comes down to you as an author. That's part of what's going to make you a good or creative author. But I guess an example could be something like just adding a bit of a different origin story to them. Maybe they were a very normal character who had good intentions in most cases, and then they were changed or transformed to a point where they had this opportunity to be intimidating or use fear as a tactic, and yet they've had to grapple with, or for the first time in their life had to be faced with the decision of whether they use that fear or not. Who do you think would win in a fight between Hagrid and Hodor? Cage match, 2 minutes, no magic allowed. Hagrid vs Hodor, Royal Rumble. Who do you think's winning? Leave a comment. The next cliche is the glowing sword, which very often would be the MacGuffin of the story, the object, which I mentioned in my last Cliches to Avoid video, the object. The glowing sword is sometimes that object. Or other times it's just a special, instantly recognizable weapon for the protagonist that sets them apart from the other characters. And that's okay, and in fact, this is another cliche of the many cliches I've spoken about before in which I am guilty of using. It's even on the cover of I don't have a copy of my book here next to me, but I'll put a picture up. It's even on the cover of my first book I made, The Glowing Sword. But I guess having a sword that glows white or blue is just, it's been done exhaustedly, I guess, now. And luckily this is something that you could approach differently pretty damn easily. Rather than just having the sword glowing with energy, you could have it described in a way that is immediately, visibly more powerful than your general weapon, in a different way. There's a lot of different creative ways you could do that. You could have it shrouded in, smoke, which again is a bit of a cliche in itself, but you get what I'm saying. There's a number of different ways to have it be visibly different to other weapons. Next up is the Deus Ex Machina store, the tavern, the little store where the hero comes across when they reach the first major city or town, where they can pick up pretty much anything they need to get them out of every sticky situation. I didn't realize how annoyed people actually get by this. Personally, I've always kind of loved that in fantasy when they come across a magical store and they buy all these things that you don't know what they're for now, but later on in the story they have this cool magical purpose. And I guess that's still fine to do, but I think where most of the frustration comes from with the Deus Ex Machina store is that it creates all of these, well, Deus Ex Machina. It creates these situations where they can get out of a really hard place just by some magical device quite easily. When they're finally presented with real risk and real danger, they subvert it with some trinket they bought from a shop, 100 pages ago. And approaching this one differently, again, I think has a few options. I wouldn't want to see this plot device, like the magical store, I wouldn't want to see that removed from fantasy altogether. I think that's one of the truly enjoyable things from fantasy stories. I would say it's even a bit of a trope in itself, but maybe make it a bit harder to use those things that they buy from the store. Maybe make it have some kind of small sacrifice that needs to be taken, or make it more complicated, because God knows when you buy a piece of technology in today's day and age, you're probably going to need the instruction booklet. So maybe create a situation like that within the fantasy story as well. Next one, another cliche I've used before, and that's healing potions, although in my case it wasn't a potion. But yeah, the healing potions has become a bit of a Deus Ex Machina in itself, that anytime there is any injury or anything that could be considered a real handicap for the heroes that would make what they're doing feel like more of a risk, they whip out a healing potion, or in my case, healing cream, and wow, that's quite a wound you've got there. Hi, my name's Cam, and I'm from BAM, and the injury's gone. Maybe we could just do without, just go with the old-fashioned ways of dealing with injuries, bandages, splints, make the struggle or risk for the hero a bit more tangible, make it feel more dangerous. The next cliche is the sentient animal sidekick, or the familiar, or however you want to word it. It's usually a small, cute little animal sidekick that hangs out with the hero and gives off some quips, some one-liners, that kind of thing. I've noticed a lot recently that happens to be like a cat. A cat's a big one within the fantasy world. For example, I just read The Devouring Grey. There's like a cat familiar in that. There's obviously Nevernight, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, if you want to go there. So those are just the cat ones. So there's obviously a lot more as well. And it's, like I said, just swapping out the human sidekick for a cute animal. This is another one I wouldn't really want to see removed from fantasy altogether. Maybe just explore some more unconventional animals, for God's sake. They don't all have to be like cats and rabbits, you know what I mean? The next cliche is the academy or school for the gifted hero. They've just found out they've got powers. No worries. There's a school for that. Yay! I don't really need to say a whole lot more on that, because I can guarantee if you're a fantasy fan, you've already read quite a few stories that go there. Wizards Academy, an academy for deities or Greek gods, and Assassin's Academy. They've all been done. So that one is more of a trope, but again, tropes can in themselves become cliches. And I feel like that one is kind of stepping into cliche territory. A bit of a sub-cliche of that cliche would be that there's always that one other student at that academy who is a bully and a real dick and a bit of a rival in terms of physical capabilities or intelligence. But it doesn't stop at them being, the arsehole bully at school. It usually escalates to the point of that bully or that nemesis at the academy or school being a traitor or the bad guy all along at the end of the story. They're so angry that this other person's more popular than them that they go to the Dark Lord and sell them out, which is just, I don't know. I don't know if that's entirely likely. Again, the academy or school thing, that's a trope that a lot of people actively enjoy and seek out, so I get it. That's never going to be something that's completely eliminated from fantasy. Just don't be afraid to explore a bit as well. The next fantasy cliche is that there is only one scientist in this fantasy world, and that scientist is evil. They are always evil. More often than not, they are building the arsenal or the weapons for the villain that makes them a real danger to the hero. If you were to sum up this cliche in a matter of words, it would be that the only scientist is a mad scientist. And maybe a good way to get around that is that you can have a bad scientist in this story, but make them a bit more three-dimensional. Give them some depth and some backstory. Maybe they come from a very long lineage of family ancestors that dabbled with science and experimentation. They did them for good purposes, with good intentions, and maybe this one mad scientist is deviating from the pack a bit. That's just an example off the top of my head. And the last fantasy cliche I'm going to mention today is a really quick one, and that's just exposition dreams. Not just at the start of the story, but through the story when there's something you need to explain. So you go with the convenient way of having the main character have a vision or a dream in which that is all explained. I've noticed this is something that's done a lot when the story is told by first person, because the author realizes, oh shit, I'm telling this through the eyes of the hero. I can't really provide some explanation on what's happening on the villain's side, which is necessary for the plot of the story. I know, I'll just have the hero have a vision of it for whatever reason. They haven't really shown any psychic tendencies before now, but it's convenient for the plot, so I guess now they are able to astral project and see what the villain's up to. Anyway, that's not all of the fantasy cliches I have listed, but that is all of the ones I will be listing in this video, so maybe there will even be a part 3 to this one, maybe in another year and a half. I hope you enjoyed this, I hope you got something out of it. Make sure you leave me a comment, and make sure you check out some of my other videos. I do a lot of writing tip videos, a lot of videos about books and bookish topics, some of it's more comedic. I just do a lot of reading and writing stuff, and if you enjoyed this one, you'll probably enjoy them. Don't get defensive if any of these things are stuff you've used in your writing. That's completely fine. Like I said, these aren't things you necessarily need to flat out avoid. I just say writing cliches to avoid because you need to avoid using them in the same way that everyone else is using them. You just need to approach them a bit more creatively. That's all. That's all it is. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch ya. Banged my f***ing elbow. God damn.